Good morning. Thanks very much for being here today. In our lives today, the balance or imbalance between employment and care responsibilities is one of the central problems we face in our everyday lives. So without knowing all of you in the audience personally, I'm confident in saying that this is one of the main struggles probably many of you face or many of your family members face, trying to reconcile care work and paid work. I thought today that I would draw attention to three things that follow from AWARE's report. First, the importance of paying attention to both gender and class when we speak of work-life balance. Second, the importance of paying attention to the links between individual choices and social context. And finally, what is more broadly at stake for our society when we pay attention to work and care. And somehow I will do all that in 10 minutes. Okay. So for quite a number of years now, work-life balance or the phrase work-life harmony have been phrases that have been mentioned in our public discourse quite a bit. In Singapore, we've been talking about and hearing a lot about what role employers should play and what roles fathers should play in creating better conditions for work-life balance. One very important aspect of this story that we haven't paid sufficient attention to, and which we are now paying more attention to, is the issue of class and class inequalities. Just as there are important gender imbalances and inequalities so that men and women have uneven burdens and uneven rights to work and to care, there are also very important inequalities in the options that people of different socioeconomic backgrounds have. And I think keeping inequality in mind and the intersection of gendered and class inequalities is very important. So I want to highlight here that although AWARE's studies focus on the lives of women in low-income circumstances, what we are confronting is not just a poverty issue, but an inequality problem. We have to keep in mind that there are very similar needs across class lines. And part of the problem we see in Singapore is that we are not all able to meet those needs equally well. And how people meet their needs, how people can meet their needs now, depends very significantly on how well they are able to purchase care services in the market and what kind of bargaining position they are in as workers. Keeping inequality in mind implies that we have to examine not just interventions targeted at a small group of people, but continue to focus our attention on the broader work-care regime in which we all make our choices. And I think that's one of the things that AWARE is pointing out in this report, is that what we're talking about is not just about individual tweaks and individual interventions at the level of individual persons, but some kind of rethinking and recalibrating of our work care regime, okay, in which we make our choices. And this brings me to my second point, which is about the importance of attention to social context, the importance of paying attention to social conditions. There is something about these issues, about how to care for our kids, about how to care for our parents, about how we will arrange our work schedules. There's something about these issues that feels very personal and feels deeply intimate. We make these decisions, they seem like personal decisions, they seem to have nothing to do with others. But we have a lot of international research, including this work that AWARE has just presented, that tells us that what feels like very personal, private decisions are made in contexts that are very social, very public. Another way of putting this is to say that when we are trying our best as individuals to figure out how to take care of our families, we're choosing from options that we have very limited control over. And when we make certain kinds of choices and not others, we also generate certain kinds of norms and habits in society, and thereby affect the kinds of choices other people do or do not have. So these may feel like very personal issues, but they're really not. There is a lot in the social context that shapes our experiences, that shapes the possibilities or impossibilities for living the lives that we would like to live. And there is a lot we do as individuals that go on to have effects on other people, whether we intend it or not, whether we are conscious of them or not. What kinds of things am I referring to when I refer to social context? Some of the things that have been mentioned this morning. The amount of money paid to people in certain kinds of jobs, the kind of formal and substantive rights workers of different occupations have, the kind of public support people do or do not receive, the kind of infrastructure of care that do or do not exist. All of these shape our so-called private choices. And when care is very often dealt with in an individualized way, through paid services that are bought by individuals, this has consequences for how we as a society conceptualize the care issue. And when people who can afford to use private resources to solve problems, they also normalize that this is how the problem ought to be solved, and thereby take attention away from the possibilities of meeting needs through the pooling of resources. Did I speak too fast? I feel like I have a lot of time, but only 1 point left. Finally, let me say briefly that what is at stake is partly larger notions about what it is to be human and how human lives ought to be organized. When we talk about the issue of work-life balance, particularly when we focus on women, we focus a lot on how we will get women into the workplace. There is a lot of value in this approach because we know that when women have money of their own, this shapes their autonomy. And we know that people can and do derive a lot of pride at being good at their jobs. But I would like to caution against using only this frame. If we think only in terms of getting women into the workplace, we tend to perpetuate the belief that this is a problem only for women and not for men. We also, very importantly, continue to be fixated on thinking that wage work is the main thing that is worthy in our society. There is a long tradition in feminist scholarship that emphasizes that we should not reject care work, and we should not reject the notion of dependence. Okay? We should not reject care work, and we should not reject the notion of dependence. Life, if we are lucky, will consist of different stages where we are capable of doing different things, multiple things at different times in our lives. Wage work is not and should not be our only contribution to the world. Dependence and interdependence, doing things for people on some things, depending on others for other things, these are not bad things. It is what makes us human. When our worth to society is narrowly defined around our capacities for employment, most of us will find ourselves unworthy at one point or another in life. So in discussing this issue of work-life balance and how we can do better as a society to support it, we must not place employment of women as the only end goal. The end goal should be real choices. The end goal should be for people, regardless of gender, of class, or whatever other social categories, to be able to make the choices that best suits their circumstances so that they can contribute in a variety of ways to society and in different ways and at different times in their lives. So in thinking about work-life balance challenges we face, and in thinking about the inequalities that exist in how people meet these challenges, I think we should think about this not just as a problem for a small group, but a problem for all of us. And I think we should shift our frames so that we can think bigger and more holistically about what we'd like to see as our shared ethos, and how everyone should have rights to make real choices about where they'd like to place their talents and their labors, how they would like to care, and how this might vary over the life course. And I think when we're able to detach our worth from just wage work, we will come closer to recognizing and affirming the inherent dignity and worth of persons. I'll stop here. Thanks.